Hello, if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.
Hi, this a demo of the Atari 2600 released in 1977. The Atari 2600 is a home video game console developed and produced by Atari, Incorporated, released in September 1977 as the Atari Video Computer System, Atari VCS. It popularized microprocessor-based hardware and games stored on swappable ROM cartridges, a format first used with a Fairchild Channel F in 1976. The VCS was bundled with 2 joystick controllers, a conjoined pair of paddle controllers, and a game cartridge, initially Combat and later Pac-Man. Sears sold the system as the Tele Games Video Arcade. Atari rebranded the VCS as the Atari 2600 in November 1982 alongside the release of the Atari 5200. Atari was successful at creating arcade video games, but their development cost and limited lifespan drove CEO Nolan Bushnell to seek a programmable home system. The first inexpensive microprocessors from MOS Technology in late 1975 made this feasible. The console was prototyped under the codename Stella by Atari subsidiary Cyan Engineering. Lacking funding to complete the project, Bushnell sold Atari to Warner Communications in 1976. The Atari VCS launched in 1977 with 9 low-resolution games on 2 kilobytes cartridges. The system's first killer app was the home conversion of Tato's arcade game Space Invaders in 1980. The VCS became widely successful, leading to the founding of Activision and other third-party game developers, and to competition from console manufacturers Mattel and Coleco. Games grew to use 4 or more times the storage size of the launch games with significantly more advanced visuals and gameplay than the system was designed for, such as Activision's Pitfall. By 1982, the Atari 2600 was the dominant game system in North America. However, it saw competition from other consoles such as the Intellivision and ColecoVision, and poor decisions by Atari management damaged both the system and company's reputation. Most notably the release of 2 highly anticipated games for the 2600, a port of the arcade game Pac-Man and E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Pac-Man became the 2600's highest-selling game, but was panned for being inferior to the arcade version. E.G. was rushed to market for the holiday shopping season and was similarly panned, and became a commercial failure. Both games, and a glut of third-party shovelware, were factors in ending Atari's relevance in the console market, contributing to the video game crash of 1983. Warner sold Atari's home division to former Commodore CEO Jack Tramiel in 1984. In 1986, the new Atari Corporation, under Tramiel, released a lower-cost version of the 2600 and the backward-compatible Atari 7800. But it was Nintendo that led the recovery of the industry with its 1985 launch of the Nintendo Entertainment System. Production of the Atari 2600 ended on January 1, 1992, with an estimated 30 million units sold across its lifetime. History. Atari, Incorporated was founded by Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney in 1972. Its first major product was Pong, released in 1972, the first successful coin-operated video game. 6. While Atari continued to develop new arcade games in following years, Pong gave rise to a number of competitors to the growing arcade game market. The competition, along with other missteps by Atari, led to financial problems in 1974. Though recovering by the end of the year, by 1975, Atari had released a Pong home console, competing against Magnavox, the only other major producer of home consoles at the time. Atari engineers recognized, however, the limitation of custom logic integrated onto the circuit board, permanently confining the whole console to only one game. The increasing competition increased the risk, as Atari had found with past arcade games and again with dedicated home consoles. Both platforms are built from integrating discrete electromechanical components into circuits, rather than programmed as on a mainframe computer. Therefore, development of a console had cost at least $100,000, equivalent to about $544,000 in 2022, plus time to complete, but the final product only had about a 3-month shelf life until becoming outdated by competition. By 1974, Atari had acquired Cyan Engineering, a Grass Valley electronics company founded by Steve Mayer and Larry Emmons, both former colleagues of Bushnell and Dabney from Ampex, who helped to develop new ideas for Atari's arcade games. Even prior to the release of the home version of Pong, Cyan's engineers, led by Mayer and Ron Milner, had envisioned a home console powered by new programmable microprocessors capable of playing Atari's current arcade offerings. The programmable microprocessors would make a console's design significantly simpler and more powerful than any dedicated single game unit. However, the cost $100 to $300 of such chips was far outside the range that their market would tolerate. Atari had opened negotiations to use Motorola's new 6800 in future systems. MOS Technology 6502/6507. In September 1975, MOS Technology debuted the 6502 microprocessor for $25 at the Wescon Trade Show in San Francisco. 11/9, Mayer and Milner attended and met with the leader of the team that created the chip, Chuck Peddle. They proposed using the 6502 in a game console and offered to discuss it further at Cyan's facilities after the show. Over 2 days, MOS and Cyan engineers sketched out a 6502-based console designed by Mayer and Milner's specifications. Financial models showed that even at $25, the 6502 would be too expensive, and Peddle offered them a planned 6507 microprocessor, a cost-reduced version of the 6502, and MOS's Riot chip for input/output. Cyan and MOS negotiated the 6507 and Riot chips at $12 a pair. MOS also introduced Cyan to Microcomputer Associates, who had separately developed debugging software and hardware for MOS, and had developed the Jolt computer for testing the 6502, which Peddle suggested would be useful for Atari and Cyan to use while developing their system. Milner was able to demonstrate a proof of concept for a programmable console by implementing Tank, an arcade game by Atari's subsidiary, Key Games, on the Jolt. As part of the deal, Atari wanted a second source of the chipset. Peddle and Pavinen suggested Synerdec, whose co-founder, Bob Schreiner, was a friend of Peddle. In October 1975, Atari informed the market that it was moving forward with MOS. The Motorola sales team had already told its management that the Atari deal was finalized, and Motorola management was livid. They announced a lawsuit against MOS the next week. Building the system, the first Stella prototype on display at the Computer History Museum. By December 1975, Atari hired Joe DeQuier, a recent graduate from University of California, Berkeley, who had been doing his own testing on the 6502. DeQuier began debugging the first prototype designed by Mayer and Milner, which gained the code name Stella after the brand of DeQuier's bicycle. This prototype included a breadboard-level design of the graphics interface to build upon. A second prototype was completed by March 1976 with the help of Jay Miner, who created a chip called the Television Interface Adapter, TIA, to send graphics and audio to a television. The second prototype included a TIA, a 6507, and a ROM cartridge slot and adapter. As the TIA's design was refined, Al Alcorn brought in Atari's game developers to provide input on features. There are significant limitations in the 6507, the TIA, and other components, so the programmers creatively optimized their games to maximize the console. The console lacks a frame buffer and requires games to instruct the system to generate graphics in synchronization with the electron gun in the cathode ray tube, CRT, as it scans across rows on the screen. The programmers found ways to raise the beam to perform other functions, while the electron gun scans outside of the visible screen. Alongside the electronics development, Bushnell brought in Gene Landrum, a consultant who had just prior consulted for Fairchild Camera and Instrument for its upcoming Channel F, to determine the consumer requirements for the console. In his final report, Landrum suggested a living room aesthetic, with a wood grain finish, and the cartridges must be idiot-proof. child-proof and effective in resisting potential static electricity problems in the living room environment. Landrum recommended it include 4 to 5 dedicated games in addition to the cartridges, but this was dropped in the final designs. The cartridge design was done by James Asher and Douglas Hardy. Hardy had been an engineer for Fairchild and helped in the initial design of the Channel F cartridges, but he quit to join Atari in 1976. The interior of the cartridge that Asher and Hardy designed was sufficiently different to avoid patent conflicts, but the exterior components were directly influenced by the Channel F to help work around the static electricity concerns. Atari was still recovering from its 1974 financial woes and needed additional capital to fully enter the home console market. Though Bushnell was wary of being beholden to outside financial sources, Atari obtained smaller investments through 1975, but not at the scale it needed, and began considering a sale to a larger firm by early 1976. Atari was introduced to Warner Communications, which saw the potential for the growing video game industry to help offset declining profits from its film and music divisions. Negotiations took place during 1976, during which Atari cleared itself of liabilities, including settling a patent infringement lawsuit with Magnavox over Ralph H. Baer's patents that were the basis for the Magnavox Odyssey. In mid-1976, Fairchild announced the Channel F, planned for release later that year, beating Atari to the market. By October 1976, Warner and Atari agreed to the purchase of Atari for $28 million. Warner provided an estimated $120 million, which was enough to fast-track Stella. By 1977, development had advanced enough to brand it the Atari Video Computer System VCs and start developing Games Combat, the pack-in game at launch. The Atari VCs was launched in September 1977 at $199, equivalent to about $960 in 2022, with 2 joysticks and a combat cartridge. 8 additional games were sold separately. Most of the launch games were based on arcade games developed by Atari or its subsidiary Key Games. For example, Combat was based on Key's Tank, 1974, and Atari's Jet Fighter, 1975. Atari sold between 350,000 and 400,000 Atari VCs units during 1977. Attributed to the delay in shipping the units and consumers' unfamiliarity with a swappable cartridge console that is not dedicated to only one game. In 1978, Atari sold only 550,000 of the 800,000 systems manufactured. This required further financial support from Warner to cover losses. Bushnell pushed the Warner Board of Directors to start working on Stella 2, as he grew concerned that rising competition and aging tech specs of the VCs would render the console obsolete. However, the board stayed committed to the VCs and ignored Bushnell's advice, leading to his departure from Atari in 1979. Atari sold 1 million consoles in 1979, particularly during the holiday season, but there was new competition from the Mattel Electronics and Television and Magnavox Odyssey to the Power of 2, which also used swappable ROM cartridges. The 2019 book They Create Worlds has Atari selling about 600,000 VC systems in 1979, bringing the installed base to a little over 1.3 million. Atari obtained a license from Taito to develop a VC's conversion of its 1978 arcade hit Space Invaders. This is the first officially licensed arcade conversion for a home console. Its release in March 1980 doubled the console's sales for the year to more than 2 million units, and it was considered the Atari VCS's killer application. Sales then doubled again for the next 2 years according to They Create Worlds. Atari sold 1.25 million Space Invaders cartridges and over 1 million VC systems in 1980, nearly doubling the install base to over 2 million, and then an estimated 3.1 million VC systems in 1981. By 1982, 10 million consoles had been sold in the United States, while its best-selling game was Pac-Man at over 8 million copies sold by 1990. Pac-Man propelled worldwide Atari VC's sales to 12 million units during 1982, according to a November 1983 article in InfoWorld magazine. In August 1984, InfoWorld magazine article says more than 15 million Atari 2600 machines were sold by 1982. A March 1983 article in IEEE Spectrum magazine has about 3 million VCs sales in 1981, about 5.5 million in 1982, as well as a total of over 12 million VCs systems and an estimated 120 million cartridges sold. In Europe, the Atari VCs sold 125,000 units in the United Kingdom during 1980, and 450,000 in West Germany by 1984. In France, where the VCs released in 1982, the system sold 600,000 units by 1989. The console was distributed by Epic Company in Japan in 1979 under the name Cassette TV Game, but not sell as well as Epic's own Cassette Vision system in 1981. In 1982, Atari launched its second programmable console, the Atari 5200. To standardize naming, the VCs was renamed to the Atari 2600 Video Computer System, or Atari 2600, derived from the manufacturer part number CX2600. By 1982, the 2600 cost Atari about $40 to make and was sold for an average of $125, equivalent to $380 in 2022. The company spent $4.50 to $6 to manufacture each cartridge, plus $1 to $2 for advertising, wholesaling for $18.95, equivalent to $60 in 2022. Third-party development. Activision, formed by Crane, Whitehead, and Miller in 1979, started developing third-party VCs games using their knowledge of VC's design and programming tricks, and began releasing games in 1980, Kaboom! 1981, and Pitfall! 1982 are among the most successful, with at least 1 and 4 million copies sold, respectively. In 1980, Atari attempted to block the sale of the Activision cartridges, accusing the four of intellectual property infringement. The two companies settled out of court, with Activision agreeing to pay Atari a licensing fee for their games. This made Activision the first third-party video game developer and established the licensing model that continues to be used by console manufacturers for game development. Activision's success led to the establishment of other third-party VCs game developers, following Activision's model in the early 1980s, including US Games, Telesys, Games by Apollo, Data Age, Zimic, Mystique, and Comavid.
Hello, if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.